experts. You know, I find this interesting. First of all, the fact checkers always get everything wrong nowadays, but the Washington Post fact checkers have had a particularly rough past 7 days, and they had fact-checked, air quote, fact-checked Governor DeSantis on the parents being domestic terrorists thing, and they reached out to Ms. Pashaw, who's his communications director. She's amazing, by the way, and they were trying to get like a quote, you know, about how he was lying about the Department of Justice calling these parents domestic terrorists and that sort of thing. And she just nailed him to the wall with all of the data on this. Now, for those of you who know what we're talking about, obviously that's already funny, but for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, the National School Board Association, which is the association that represents school boards all across the country, they're the ones that did a big old media blitz about parents who are concerned with their kids being shown pornography in school, being taught critical race theory and a bunch of other stuff. They were concerned about that, and they've been very active at these school board meetings as a result. In some communities where the school board continues to ignore the parents or has been confrontational at the school board meeting, some of those parents have decided to camp out outside of their home, which they're allowed to do, and protest, okay? Is it annoying? Sure it is, but you're allowed to do it. And liberals have been doing that to Republican lawmakers in Congress for several months now, and nobody has said a thing. And suddenly the news media is like, well, parents can't do this to school board members. Why can they do it to, Republican members of Congress? Why can they throw things at their house and bang on their windows and stuff like that, but parents can't do that for their school board presidents in their communities? And, of course, the answer is they can. Yeah, I get it. It's uncomfortable. You don't like people protesting outside of your house. But as long as they're not on your property and they're not breaking any laws, they're allowed to do it. So there was a story that came out. The National School Board Association, basically, they go into the news. They tell everybody, these parents are threatening us. They're domestic terrorists. We want to treat it like domestic terrorism. They wrote a letter to the Department of Justice to treat this as if it were domestic terrorists. That was actually in the letter. And the Department of Justice said that they were basically going to mobilize against it, right? The Department of Justice, however, left domestic terrorist out of it. And so what has happened is you've got the National School Board Association saying that parents are domestic terrorists, and we want the Department of Justice to do something about it. The Department of Justice says they're going to do something about it, but the Department of Justice themselves don't use the term domestic terrorists. And so now all the fact checkers are running around and going, nobody has called them domestic terrorists, except for the president of the National School Board Association on the news and in the letter that started all of this. But I digress. So what's interesting about this is that last week there was a development in this story from the Washington Free Beacon. The NSBA president and its CEO consulted with the White House on the letter before they released the letter to the public. Now, this is the letter that was sent to the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, asking him to treat these parents as if they were domestic terrorists. The emails obtained by Parents Defending Education through public records requests reviewed by the Washington Free Beacon reveal that the National School Board Association's president and CEO sent the letter to Biden on September 29th without approval from the organization's board. The letter said that the acts of some parents at school board meetings across the country could be considered a form of domestic terrorism and hate crimes, which, of course, is absurd. The emails also show that the White House asked the association for examples of threats against school board members days before the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, created a task force, because the government loves that word, task force, of officials from the FBI and the Justice Department to determine how to prosecute alleged crimes at school board meetings. This isn't difficult. If you commit a crime at a school board meeting, your local law enforcement will charge you with the crime. But now you've got to make crimes up. You've got to apply laws that don't apply to concerned parents at school board meetings, like domestic terrorism and Patriot Act stuff, and that's what they wanted. That was what the letter said. Apply the Patriot Act to these parents who show up at these school board meetings and charge them and treat them as domestic terrorists. So they want new laws that were never applied to parents to be applied to parents so they can be charged as if they were domestic terrorists, so parents stop showing up at school board meetings because, again, school boards are made up of the lowest common denominator in your community, usually alcoholic alcoholic socialites who don't know what they're talking about. And then they're not used to people being angry at them. They're used to everybody wanting to be in their presence and buy them wines and read their books and that sort of stuff. The emails also show that the White House asked the association for examples of those threats. The letter made clear that the White House was aware of the letter before it was released, while raising questions about whether the White House colluded with the association on the letter to prompt federal action. This is a problem. So the National School Board Association sent the letter accusing parents of being domestic terrorists and asking for the Department of Justice to get involved to Joe Biden, to the White House. It was reviewed by the White House, who seemed to acknowledge all of this. It was reviewed by the White House. And then all of a sudden, the Attorney General is involved in mobilizing a task force, which includes the FBI, to go after concerned parents. But again, it's a conspiracy theory that they want to control your children's minds. Total conspiracy. Not real at all. It's just pure coincidence. So anyway, Red State writes, so basically the Biden administration is using this letter for justification of an investigation while having themselves been involved in the letter. Hey, where does that sound familiar? So the Biden administration is using the letter to justify mobilizing the FBI and the Department of Justice against domestic terrorist parents while ignoring BLM and Antifa violence, which included attacks on federal buildings with people inside, by the way. Ignoring all of that, pretending that doesn't exist. But the White House is saying the letter is the reason that we're doing this, but the White House was involved with the letter. It sure smells like the dossier, doesn't it? That's exactly what the FBI did. The FBI was involved in the dossier, and the FBI sent the dossier to the media in order to use the media reports of the dossier as justification to get FISA warrants, which the media said didn't exist. You getting the pattern now? This is what they do. Now, here's where things get interesting. That story comes out last week in the Washington Free Beacon, and this weekend, the National School Board Association apologizes for the letter calling parents terrorists. Isn't that interesting? On Friday, the National School Board Association disavowed and apologized for a letter that called concerned parents domestic terrorists. In a message to NSBA members, the organization said that they regret and apologize for the letter. The letter ultimately led to an FBI crackdown from the Biden regime. To be clear, the safety of school board members, other public officials, and educators and students is our top priority, and there remains important work to be done on this issue. That's the NSBA Board of Directors on Friday. However, there was no justification for some of the language used in the letter, they continued. The NSBA board went on to further apologize for strain and stress caused by the situation. Now, keep in mind, the NSBA president went on the news and called them domestic terrorists. So we get a report last week that the White House colluded with the National School Board Association on this letter calling parents domestic terrorists. So just so you're crystal clear, basically the Biden administration called you terrorists for being angry about what your kids are being taught in school and showing up and getting involved in the political process, as is your constitutional right to do. Just so we are crystal clear on this, the Biden administration called you terrorists. And now that story comes out that the White House was involved in all of this from the very beginning, before they mobilized the FBI and the Department of Justice against normal parents, now the NSBA is apologizing to everybody and saying that they used words that were not justifiable in any way in that letter. You know what's missing, though, in this letter? An apology to the parents. So they issued a statement apologizing to NSBA members, but they never apologized to the parents that they accused wrongfully of being domestic terrorists. They never apologized to the parents that not only that they called domestic terrorists on national television and in this letter, but that they colluded with the White House to mobilize the Department of Justice and the FBI against. They never apologized to those parents. And the fact that they say there was no justification for using those terms in that letter says that there was no justification to mobilize the Department of Justice or the FBI against those parents, since there was no justification for calling them domestic terrorists or accusing them of hate crimes. So why did the Biden administration, who colluded with the NSBA on this, mobilize the Department of Justice and the FBI against said parents when even the NSBA says there was no justification for using that type of language? Remember what Orwell said in his final interview? To imagine the future, imagine a boot perpetually on the face of humankind. And more coming up, 95.3 MNC.
Casey Hendrickson.
News Talk 95.3.